Okay. Mr. McLean, seconded by Mr. Strahl, moves that the first report of the Special Committee of the Economic Relations between Canada and the United States, presented on Thursday, April 15, 2021, be concurred in. Debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I will be splitting my time today with the member for Chilliwack Hope. Mr. Speaker, today is May 10th. In 2 days, on May 12th, the Governor of the State of Michigan has stated that she will shut down Enbridge Line 5, which provides 540,000 barrels of oil per day to Canadian refineries in Sarnia, Southern Ontario, and further feeds facilities in Quebec. It is estimated that 30,000 jobs depend on this important international infrastructure in Southern Ontario alone. Today, we are debating concurrence of the report of the Special Committee on the Economic Relationship between Canada and the United States, which was presented to this House on April 15th. That was 25 days ago, and still there are no signs that the Prime Minister is engaged on this file. How much of Canada's petroleum needs will be disrupted? Well, 540,000 barrels per day equates to about 1/4, 25%, of Canada's daily consumption of oil. And this shortage will fall on the back of two provinces, Ontario and Quebec, as it will represent approximately half of the supply of this vital energy feedstock to their economic output, as the products are refined into inputs for petrochemicals, plastics and textiles, and much more that is the heart of Canada's manufacturing sector, to heating homes, driving cars, and getting goods like food and supplies to markets efficiently and quickly. In short, cutting off this infrastructure will result in a disastrous outcome for Canada. Tens of thousands of jobs, the supply chain that feeds our economy, and the manufacturing sector that has been built and depends upon this critical infrastructure, all waiting with their fingers crossed on the outcome. It is safe to say that the closure of this energy infrastructure represents a national energy security emergency. 2 days away, yet Line 5 has been threatened with closure since November 13th. 6 months have passed. I spoke about this matter needing resolution quickly at that time, but this government frittered its time away. Enbridge, one of Canada's great companies, has actively engaged with the governor's office and moved the matter to U.S. federal court where it seems to belong. Yet the governor wants the matter heard in a state court. Nevertheless, the federal court did instruct the parties to enter into mediation discussions, which have been ongoing. It should be noted that the governor would not even return calls from Enbridge on the matter prior to the federal court judge's instructions. Although seemingly a productive exercise, the governor has insisted during mediation talks that she would be shutting down Line 5 on May 12th, whatever the process, timing, or outcome of mediation discussions. This is hardly a productive or mediatory stance. Why is the government of Michigan taking on this posture, and as unreasonable as it seems? To a friendly trading partner, international security partner, energy security partner, environmental progress partner, for a line that is an energy lifeblood for her state and other neighboring states, as well as Canada, ostensibly for the safety of water in the Great Lakes Basin. So shut down a pipeline that has never leaked, in which the company operating it is actively going through state regulatory processes to make even more secure with an underground concrete tunnel. The outcome of this misguided approach will move that product to trucks, rail cars, and barges. Yes, barges on the Great Lakes. All these outcomes have larger environmental footprints and greater environmental risks, even to the Great Lakes, than the intrinsically safe pipeline option. So by clear analysis, there are other reasons. The governor is a politician, so politics. Politics, for whose benefit we can speculate, but at whose cost it is clear. Those parties dependent upon this energy infrastructure for their livelihood, their jobs, their farms, the goods they produce, the heat for homes and barns, so that our food supply is safe and an international trade relationship between two of the world's most friendly trading nations. This is the fallout of what is really at stake. The economies of our two countries, Canada and the US, have prospered over decades, better than economies elsewhere in the developed world, because of our strong trade links and the rule of law that governs our institutions, including our trading relationships. The backbone of this mutually beneficial trade relationship is our infrastructure. And the fundamentally most important part of that infrastructure is our energy infrastructure. Previous governments of all stripes in Canada and the US have recognized this importance. In 1977, our two governments signed the Transit Pipelines Treaty to ensure that the energy, transportation, and trade between our two nations did not suffer because of political whims or short-term self-interest at the expense of our joint long-term prosperity and security. Yet, here we are. A state government is acting unilaterally, seemingly in direct contravention of our international treaty. It begs the question whether there is any meaning behind the words in that treaty, or do we have a trade partner that recognizes a Canadian government that either does not want to stand up for Canada's energy security or perhaps doesn't know how? Surely it can't be because the government of Canada doesn't recognize the importance of the infrastructure and the associated energy security. It follows on our country's disastrous showing in renegotiating the new NAFTA, CUSMA, and a negotiating strategy where Canada didn't show up with the real issues to be discussed for our benefit until too late. At one point, we were excluded from the trade discussions because the other parties did not take us seriously. No one was there to solve the emerging issues between our countries. In the end, we ended up with far less in the trade agreement than we had in the previous agreement, and our elected officials were relieved to sign it because it could have been so much worse. So a victory is now defined by this government as doing worse, but not losing completely. The bar is being lowered. Since then, the U.S. has continued to ignore the trade treaty's terms on steel and aluminum, and now is pursuing a Buy America policy in which Canada is an outsider. So much for preferential access to our markets, so much for free trade, so much for trade treaties, so much for Canada standing up for the terms it negotiates in these agreements. This government will roll over on any trade issue. We need to get serious. Canada's standing in the world, economically and diplomatically, has declined precipitously in the past 6 years. We are viewed as a non-serious world partner, more concerned with virtuous statements.
Excuse me, I want to remind the Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway to have his mic off, please. The Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway, please turn your mic off. The Honourable Member for Calgary Centre can continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank my colleague from Vancouver Kingsway for his intervention thus far. Canada's standing in the world, economically and diplomatically, has declined precipitously in the past 6 years. We are viewed as a non-serious world player, more concerned with virtuous statements than fulfilling any objectives or standing for any principles. The ranking of our competitiveness has fallen from 5th in the world to 13th between 2015 and 2019. In foreign affairs, we have moved to a status where trade disputes are handled by our trade partners with hostage diplomacy. It's as if we can foresee the headlines from 2030. When did Canada lose its relevance in the world? And the world will point to this period, a period where an aimless, disinterested, non-serious government spoke virtuous words of all it stood for and then delivered no tangible results. It failed to recognize Canada's strengths, its role in the world, and its ability to add value to world events. It lost sight of getting things done. It couldn't build domestic pipelines after canceling some of its most promising ones, delaying others, making the process for approving infrastructure opaque, and adding years to regulatory process. Accountability and oversight disappeared, and Canadians weren't paying attention to the incompetence. Canada is, led by a government intent on staying in power at all costs, including the future of the country itself. Then a foreign government, our most important trading partner and ally, ignored a treaty between our two countries and allowed the shutdown of a key piece of infrastructure on which Canada's energy security depends. Why did the government of Canada not engage adequately with the U.S. government? Perhaps it was because the interest groups which supported the governor of Michigan were the same ones on which the government of Canada relied for its own virtue signaling. Or perhaps it was just an incompetent prime minister who didn't know that international engagement meant getting involved in personal diplomacy with his U.S. counterpart when Canada's interests were at grave risk. Line 5 is recognized as a critical piece of international infrastructure, and its regulation is overseen by PHMSA in the United States. The Canadian equivalent would be the Department of Transport. Other critical departments that should be actively involved in this file include Foreign Affairs, International Trade, and Energy. This issue requires a whole of government approach, and the leader of that effort should be the Prime Minister. Delegating this matter to the Minister of Natural Resources does not accord it the importance it requires. We need to do better. The Prime Minister needs to meet.
Unfortunately, the honourable member's time is up. He'll have time during questions and comments.
20 seconds because I got interrupted there.
We did stop the clock at that time. Sorry, but the honourable member will be able to add during questions and comments. The honourable parliamentary questions and comments. The honourable parliamentary secretary, the government house leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, the Conservative Opposition Party continues its shameful, destructive force on the floor of the House of Commons. Simply amazing. In terms of here, Canadians are concerned about the pandemic, amongst other things, and the Conservatives still want to play political partisan games on the House. Madam Chair, or Madam Deputy Speaker, there was an emergency debate on the issue, yet the Conservatives still haven't seen fit to put it as one of the opposition days. When will the Conservatives start recognizing what Canadians want, get serious, and start allowing for government legislation to be able to move forward? Why the constructive moves coming from the Conservative Party day in and day out?
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Well, I thank my colleague on the other side of the House for that Freudian slip. This is very constructive, Madam Speaker, and this is about Canadian jobs. This is about one of the most important issues for the future of Canada, and it is a pattern that we've seen happening. We are speaking up loudly at this point in time for the interests of Canadians, and we are asking that the Prime Minister get to meet with the U.S. President and get this matter resolved along the terms of the Transit Pipelines Treaty today or tomorrow. The deadline set by the Governor of Michigan is at our door. When will this Prime Minister act?
Questions and comments? The honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And listening to the member from Calgary Centre and his speech in opening this debate, you know, I think pretty much everybody in this House wants this dispute settled and settled quickly. It is undoubtedly going before the courts, and part of that is based on the Pipeline Transit Treaty. He mentioned that a couple of times. But the treaty also says that it is subject to regulations by appropriate government authorities. I'm not a lawyer, but I would assume that might include state authorities. And so this could go on. And I just wonder, you know, beyond what we've done in the emergency debate last Thursday, just wondering what the member thinks that we could be doing here that would move this forward. We all care about those thousands of jobs in Ontario and Quebec, and I just don't see the point of this debate here today.
Honourable member for Calgary Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for the question. Indeed, we are talking about accepting a parliamentary report here, Enbridge's Line 5, an interim report from a parliament committee. So this is a concurrence motion today to get this on the table 2 days before this line shuts down. And we're actually have been calling on the Prime Minister to get actively engaged in this file for several months now. It is not happening without his engagement. And I appreciate that my member on the other side doesn't understand the difference between federal primacy and international treaties versus state regulation, but it is a transit pipeline treaty for the security of two nations that was designed that way, and it is meant to be overrule all the other regulations except for, of course, safety. We are looking at a very important international treaty here that is at risk, Madam Speaker.
We have time for a brief question. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And very quickly, I'll just add that we did in emergency debate canvass this issue, that it is a legitimate concern of the state of Michigan to protect the waters of the Great Lakes, but that we all agree a solution must be found. This is an existing route, and it should be maintained by one means or another. Very quickly to the honourable member, he mentioned in debate the other night that losing the energy chapter of NAFTA in the new CUSMA somehow hurt Canada's energy security. And I actually believe it's the opposite, since that section only served to ensure that whatever quantity of fossil fuels or any product Canada was exporting to the US would have to be maintained in perpetuity for those energy products, that even if we were running out of, for instance, our supplies of natural gas, we would be required to continue to sell whatever share the US had gotten at its highest level. And would he not agree that this is an improvement to have autonomy?
Calgary Centre, a brief answer, please.
Well, I thank my honourable member for the question, and it is a good question. And the actual terms of the energy agreement in the former NAFTA was a proportional sharing agreement, not an absolute sharing agreement to the highest levels that we provide to the U.S. It was a proportional sharing agreement, so that if in some emergency or some international incident we had to cut back 1/4 of the U.S., we'd be incumbent to cut back 1/4 of our own supply as well, as would they, if you think about the way that this product goes across the borders in both its raw state and its finished state. So it's called a treaty for a reason, so that we can actually get some solidity on our energy security as a continent going forward. Thank you again.
Questions and, resuming debate, the honourable member for Chilliwack Hope.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's a pleasure to share time with the member for Calgary Centre, who I think did an excellent job laying out the Conservative Party's frustration with this situation. This has been the potential shutdown of Line 5 has been on our radar since November of 2020. And once again, this government has ignored a deadline or failed to manage to a deadline. And we're now 2 days away from that. And we're not hearing much from the government. And this is why I find it quite interesting that the parliamentary secretary to the government House Leader has declared a discussion on Line 5 and the tens of thousands of jobs that will be lost in Sarnia and other places where workers are anxious, quite frankly, as to what is going to happen with Line 5. For him to declare that that's a waste of time, for him to declare that this